should have yours on your side.
Okay, yeah, mine's recording too, so I think we're good to go.
Okay. Okay, great, great. Well, I guess we'll go ahead and get started since we're recording now.
Yep.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sahila, as you probably know, and this is my friend Liam, who I've met through Facebook. I was going through some of Carrie Smith's posts, and
Yep.
I had some of your comments and likes, and I was like, I need to get connected with that one.
Well, thank you for connecting, Suhaila. Nice to meet you.
Absolutely, absolutely. And thank you for being here today because as you know, and as many of some of you that are watching know, I had a lot of bad experiences with mandatory BLM and critical race theory teach-ins or trainings, indoctrination sessions, what
Yep,
have you.
yep, yep.
And I wanted to interview and just have a discussion with you, with Liam here, because he also recently has been going through some difficulties with that.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess before I hand it over to you, we'll just say that for legal sakes, we're not naming names or going into details
Yep.
or anything like that. So if there are any names, they've been changed, and
Well,
we're just here to share our experiences about
yep.
what we've gone through. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So could you tell me, Liam, like, do you identify a particular way politically or um, like as
Well,
a liberal, conservative, or?
well, I sort of flip between what I call old school left and politically homeless at the moment. So, little sort of background on me: I was brought up in England as a child with my single mother in the 80s. So that was a period of Reaganomics and Thatcherism and austerity and big class battles with the miners and unions and destruction of manufacturing in England. So I was very much brought up with the class-based perspective left, and up until about sort of 2011, sort of maybe a few years after that, that's what I thought the left represented. And but yeah, I guess like you've noticed in the past like 5 years or so, that the left has changed dramatically.
Dramatically.
Yeah, it's they never talk about class anymore, from what I see. So um yeah, so like what one of the I little history, like I was involved with Occupy Wall Street in 2011. So I was inspired by watching the videos. I remember watching Tim Pool's live streaming, and
Ah,
so I was living in Sydney at the time, so we were inspired by all that, and we took over what's called Martin Place in Sydney. That was like the Wall Street of Sydney, where all the big banks were and the government was.
yes, yes.
So for about 2 years, we basically occupied this space 24/7, and I sort of did what Tim Poor did because I just got a really nice camera. So I'm like, okay, well, let's do some videos and take some photos. So during that time, I was taking thousands of photos and doing videos and supporting all kinds of groups. So there's homeless people there were feminists, there was Aboriginals, immigrants, a lot of people who'd recently been made homeless because the job had been like automated, or farmers who had lost
Yeah.
everything
Mhm.
because the banks or the council had just screwed them over. And so that was my sort of activism. And then like after Occupy Sydney up until about 2018,
Mhm.
I had a lot of friends mainly at Sydney University. I think it's probably the biggest university in Australia. So I had a
Uh-huh.
lot of left-wing activist friends there. So up until about 2017, I was involved with a lot of activism. So there's environmental activism. I went to like Aboriginal sites where they had little campouts and stuff. Sometimes I take photos and videos just to document their struggles because there was like development encroaching on their land, or there was like this sacred sites which are threatened by mining. And there was also, all sorts of things happening at uni with like staff cutbacks and wage restraint. And so I would go along to that with my camera and document things.
Mhm.
So yeah, that was sort of my sort of left wing experience up until about 2017 when I began things change. But I don't know, maybe we could talk. catch up about that later. So
Sure, sure. And I think it's interesting to note because I was a bit younger when Occupy Wall Street was going on. So I was still in high school, but I still tried to, I remember when the protests were going on in Florida at the time when I was finishing high school and in college, and I had some friends that were involved. And it seems like there was a great deal of coming together from different groups and a lot more organization and a lot more solidarity and focus, I think.
Yeah.
Than what we have now, which seems to just be chaos.
Yeah. Extremism and chaos.
Yeah. So that's interesting because I think we've both, I also kind of identify as like more classical, old school liberal / politically homeless right now. It's like, where do I belong? I'm not sure. And I find a lot of, I have a lot of acquaintances and friends that have similar experiences to us, you know, more old school liberal, but today they've really found themselves kind of lost in like, where am I now? Like, this is not the Democratic Party. This is not liberalism. This is not the left that I knew 5-10 years ago. So one of the things that really surprised me and made me decide to speak up about like the mandatory trainings and stuff was I was aware of some of these ideas and this ideology and these things because I was so heavily involved in many leftist spaces and many activist spaces. But I had specifically walked away from that for a while because the nonprofit world and activism, it takes a toll on you. You get burnout, you know? So I was like, let me join another nonprofit and I'll just work mainly with, I did a lot of work with homeless youth and the homeless community, low-income families in Oregon. And I ended up joining a housing agency that ended up being one of the most liberal, crazy agencies or organizations that I had ever joined. And that was such a surprise to me because going into it, there were no sort of like values contracts or kind of this upfront idea of this is what we are. And I don't know if it started out with like that because I started right before a little bit before quarantine and when Black Lives Matter and all of that started. And once the protests started getting pretty big with Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, then our CEO started coming out mandating all these trainings. And I was like, wow, this isn't just in little lefty safe spaces on college campuses anymore. This is in like normie spaces, as I call it. And it's everywhere. I'm hearing schools, universities, housing agencies, nonprofits. So tell me a little bit about like, what is your experience with this last job, like the kind of job that you had, I guess, and your experience with these trainings or this kind of ideology?
Well, yes, like I say, I saw the beginnings of this ideology 4 years ago with these student activists, and I guess like I'd heard about it mainly from American sources like the critical race theory stuff and government and corporations. But I was a little shocked because I live in the UK and I fairly recently started working for a major corporation here. And within about a month after they'd set us up on all our systems, we had access. We were given all these like online learning units to do. And one of them was specifically the inclusion and diversity training. And that had been actually updated last year because of BLM and George Floyd and all that stuff. And I started reading the content and I'm like, yeah, I know this stuff. I know where it comes from. I know what it does to people and organizations, and it's not good. And specifically, it's intersectionality. That was one of the first concepts we brought up, and I'm like, oh my god,
here we go,
here we go, start at the deep end. And then also, another thing was unconscious bias that was in the trainings as well. And fortunately, the UK government last December has actually banned unconscious bias training for all government departments. So that's quite amazing.
Wow, good on them. Good on them. Yeah.
But yes, is this UK corporation still doing it months later? I don't know why. Also, there was the other concept of microaggressions, which just makes me laugh and hear that. And so. Wow, I mean, I knew it was bogus, but I actually looked up and I found a paper from 2017 which basically says, there's no actual like scientific or social evidence. There's no academia or method which backs up what this stuff is, and it's like, it's like it's not ready for prime time. Nobody should be using this stuff, and I'm just like, and they want me to tick off on this. Like I can quote, they say, upon completion of this training, you are expected to practice the skills you have learned and share your commitment to building a more diverse and inclusive workspace. And I'm just like, no, I'm not doing that. Like I actually, because I think I had about 2 months to do it. So I sort of put it off for about a month. And but yeah, eventually I had to bring it up because I knew if I didn't tick that box, you know, I was going to be, I had my account cut off and I couldn't do my job. And
Right, because it's almost the equivalent of like signing a contract if you tick the box, right? And right before, I don't know what ended up happening at my agency because I ended up being ousted or having to leave. But in that time, they were coming up with like a values contract. Like after the fact, everyone had been hired, you know, and we have our own, you know, contracts already for our different positions and everything. Now they want these commitment to diversity and equity contracts. And things that were included on there was like, you know, I consent to having all of my social media accounts. I'll give them over to you guys for you to look through my social media to make sure that I'm not liking, sharing, or, you know, white supremacist material or from other people. We want to make sure that you're not promoting, you know, racist material. You know, doing all of these certain amount of like, I think it was like once a month, you know, a different diversity and equity kind of class or teaching or course. And it's all, it was just crazy. And I think my issue with it is that this is a religion. This is clearly a religion. Like you said, there's no evidence behind it. It's sophistry, it's theology, it's ideas, theories. And I could understand, like, if I was going to a Catholic institution and before I got hired, they wanted me to sign a value contract, making sure that I'm a good Catholic and I'm not having premarital sex or using birth control, or I haven't been divorced, or I don't support gay marriage, all these things, right? And, you know, right. And I have zero issue with that. If you want to be a Catholic institution and you want to have your Catholic value contracts, fine, but that's on your time, you know, and that's in your spaces. And I wouldn't go to a Catholic institution because I would expect that, right? But now it's like there's this social justice religion that is just kind of very sneakily it's just permeated everything everywhere, and people don't have this idea of it being compelled speech, of it being religious, and people don't kind of see it like that, like a religious values contract.
It's insidious. I see my friends. I just saw a friend posting about toxic masculinity, and it's just like, you know, you see all your friends like re-spouting the
lingo,
Bible-like passages, and it's just like, you're speaking this language, but you don't understand where it comes from. It's frustrating and frightening, frankly.
Yes. And can I ask you, since you, you know, have been involved in Occupy and all of those things, in this new environment where you're working, I don't know, you said it's a corporation, so it might be really huge, but it seemed like in my organization, I was one of the most experienced people as far as left-wing activism, liberalism, actually doing work, not just theorizing and speaking about stuff. But for years, I'd been in that environment like you had experience with Occupy. So I feel like we kind of had a background knowledge going into this, because this wasn't new knowledge for me. Like you said, this wasn't new to you. You'd heard a couple years ago, you'd seen the warning signs. So do you think a lot of your coworkers or friends weren't familiar with a lot of this knowledge, and they just think they're a little naive and just really want to do well? They're well-meaning, and they think that to be a good person, they just have to take these new ideas and get with the times, as it were?
Yeah, I think that is. I mean, honestly, I'm not actually working at their corporation anymore. So
Right.
I didn't actually get much time to talk to them, because I actually believe that apart from the few managers who I'd spoken to about my concerns, I hadn't, up until literally a couple of weeks before I was fired, I hadn't spoken to any of my like co-workers in this department.
I see. Yeah.
So I actually believe one of the things I literally got a call one day and saying, "Oh, Liam, you have to leave the building at like midday, and someone's going to escort you out, and you're going to have to hand in your like computer and whatever. Unless you got fired on the same day, no warning, nothing.
Wow.
Yeah,
So you just ended up telling them about, you're not gonna click the box.
yeah.
Did they have anything to, to respond to you about like your feelings or your worries or concerns, or did they have any sort of concern to actually like want to work through it and keep you as an employee since they did end up hiring you?
Well, they did. I mean, there was a few weeks of sort of negotiations,
Mm.
and I did have a meeting with one of the HR people, and in preparation for that, I actually wrote like a 8-page document just going through the
Mm.
training and saying, okay, well,
Right.
this is what intersectionality was, and this is how it's metastasized in the past 30 years. I also talk about critical race theory and how that's also related to intersectionality. I posted like articles and videos from people like Brett Weinstein.
Mm.
I talk about that paper which debunks microaggressions. Also go into the unconscious bias thing and mention that thing about the UK government not doing it anymore.
Right.
And
Right.
so they sort of were chewed on that for about a week, but then it sort of came back from upper management. It's like, oh no, sorry, you either tick the box or we go. It's like a legal requirement or something they were saying. So they didn't give
Yeah.
me a third way. It was like tick the box or you're out.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of what happened with me. HR actually made everything worse. I know now thinking about it going back, I never should have went to HR first. I should have connected with a couple of coworkers first because I found out that there were other people in my agency that were concerned. But it was kind of the same thing, a bit of going back and forth, and then eventually from the head up, they did give me a third option in a way. They were like, well, if you don't do this training, you have to come to us with a different kind of material or training. But it had to meet all of their standards under anti-racism and equity and diversity and all these things. So you can do exactly what we're doing, but not in the way that we're doing it, basically. And I could never get an answer. Well, what makes something anti-racist or homophobic or transphobic or whatever? Because the stuff you guys are teaching me seems really transphobic and really racist. And yeah. And one thing I'm curious about UK too, because my agency that was pushing this BLM stuff so hard, all of the trainings and stuff were chosen by mostly middle-aged liberal white people. Is that the same in the UK? Do you see that? Like, is it mostly a liberal white people led thing? Because I think there's a lot of maybe white guilt and like original sin kind of the shame, like pushing a lot of people to overcompensate for their white guilt.
Yeah, well, that is kind of like in England, there is still a lot of guilt, I think, especially with left-wing or centrist people about, the whole English colonialism and slavery. And that's still like, I think the woke left or whatever you want to call them have kind of like tried to inflate that over the past years. Like I remember one friend of mine who I've known for almost 30 years, and he lives in England, and like 30 years ago he had an accident and he damaged his foot, and he's been disabled for 30 years and living on the dole, on minimal disability benefits. His life isn't great, and yet even he thinks he has white privilege compared to like colored people in this country. He's the poorest of the poor, he's disabled. I'm just like, you what, mate?
Yeah.
But I mean, in terms of like another thing I was going to talk about was like, so after going through this training and like going, I know this stuff, there was also other things. So this company has an online media portal. It's a bit like Facebook. And about a month after I started, they posted a video called Getting Comfortable with the Language of Inclusion. So this is, I don't know if this was a main diversity expert the company hired, but I think she was. And like, this is a meeting between this diversity expert and like two higher up managers in this corporation. And it's like a 1 hour, Robin DiAngelo struggle session,
Yes.
like evergreen all over again. And I've got some quotes from it if you're interested. It was
Yeah, sure.
like so one of the quotes this diversity expert says is, if you're not kind of conscious and aware of this stuff, and if you're not doing something, then quite frankly, you're a perpetrator. Right. I'm like, wow, that's like you're either with us or against us, you know.
Exactly. Your silence is violence, kind of.
Exactly, yeah.
Yes.
And then also there's another quote from the video. It's like, there's a new call to action. It's a call to arms where we're saying that you have to be an activist. I'm like, no, I come to work to do my job and, you know, have a career. And if I want to be an activist, I'll do it at home in my own time.
Exactly.
You know, impulsion, you know. I'm just like, it's like what they've been doing in uni for the past 20 years, and now it's in corporations, you know, trying to
right. It's like it's like it's critical justice and nutrition. I was listening to something the other day, and critical justice in hairdressing, and critical justice in veterinary schools, and they want everybody to, you know, whatever you do, dovetail it towards liberal activism. And you know, it's really interesting because one of we got a whole like online booklet of sorts as a part of one of our trainings, and it describes 3 different columns: the like the evolution towards anti-racism, and you start out as an ally, and then you move up to an activist, and then you graduate to accomplice. And it was like, that kind of sound, accomplice. That sounds a little like nefarious. But things that they would put in the accomplice bar are things, or column is a lot of things that we're seeing now. And they literally said, you need to go and disrupt white spaces like churches and synagogues. You need to disrupt white schools. And they even had something about educating children and what an ally versus an activist versus an accomplice does, and how they treat other people's children. So it's not just that you're teaching your own children. When you have access to other people's children, you will indoctrinate them with anti-racist ideology, whether their teachers or their parents know. It's like, this is insane. You're telling people that, like, we're working at like a housing agency, and you're telling us to be accomplices to, you know, anti-racism and go disrupt white spaces. And it's very bizarre.
Well, they want us to all turn into Antifa, you know? I mean, that's what it sounds like.
Right. And I mean, I was in Oregon too while all of this stuff was going on with Antifa and the riots, and different parts of Oregon just looking like a war zone. And we also got, you know, we had a day or two of focusing on defunding the police and why we needed to do that. And it was just, you know, we're supposed to be in the business of housing low-income people and like building community. Like, I'm not here to be an Antifa like activist, you know. And I feel like so much of this, I don't know, obsession with the talk and doing the work, which just mostly means like virtue and value signaling in verbal ways. All of this has really tainted activism and actual like liberal work and social work, charity work. And I feel like nobody's actually getting help these days, because like the people that are activists supposed to be helping are just arguing about everything, while the people they're arguing about are still poor, they're still suffering. Like you said, nobody talks about class anymore. So while these LGBT activists are arguing about, you know, neo pronouns and bunny and bunny self and princess and princess self, like there are still homeless LGBT kids being kicked out of their homes that are out on the street selling themselves or drugs or what have you to get by. And here's these so-called activists arguing about pronouns. Like, there's such a nefarious nature to the self-righteousness of the like of all of this. It's just, I don't know if you have an opinion on that, or
I've got a few stories like you said. I think, I don't know, maybe you can tell me, but as far as I can tell, nothing the work you've done in the past years has actually been productive. It's all just destructive.
Yes.
I can't think of any positive outcomes. You know, I'm open to be made wrong on that. But I remember an interview I heard a few years ago, and it was this woman in Australia, and she joined one of these socialist groups, and this group was involved with a lot of, like, immigration is a big issue in Australia, like, well, there's most places. And she was talking about how actually she was in the socialist group, and she was actually like getting in contact with the immigrants, and like, because they have language and culture barriers, she was helping them like get housing and government benefits, being actually helping these people.
Right.
But she soon got the message from a socialist group that actually she needs to stop doing that, because it's better that she put her energy into the revolution, and then once they have the revolution, then they can help the immigrants. It's just like
right.
it's just crazy.
Yeah, and I used to very proudly call myself an activist, but these days I hesitate because it's been so watered down or so dirtied, so tarnished. Because I think activist, when people hear that, they think of an angry person on Twitter or something, or somebody. It's synonymous with someone that will ruin my life or my business or my reputation. And whether it's LGBT activism or activism in the Latino or Black communities or low-income communities or immigration or food relief issues, all these things have been suffering because no one's focusing on them. And I see more and more social workers, community health workers, people are waking up to this, and they're like, I can't do this. I have to walk away. Now, there are certainly some that a lot of social workers, their religion is social justice. I can understand that. So they are really, really deep into like the Robin DiAngelo and Kendi and all of that, which we had to read that too. We had lectures by Kendi and DiAngelo we had to watch. So there are people that are really into that, but I've had more and more younger social work students actually email me, or on my Facebook or on my YouTube videos, and they told me about their experiences just in social work classes in college, and then doing little apprenticeships here and there. They're like, I've worked all this time to get this degree, and I thought this is what I wanted to do, but it's become too cult-like. I'm going to have to just walk away. And I said, I can't recommend or suggest to you that you do anything different, because there was already enough red tape and restrictions and rules to begin with on a state and federal level to do good work and make a difference in the community. And now you have all of this woke religion where, it's being very heavily pushed in a lot of the nonprofit agencies and social work kind of charities and stuff like that. So even a lot of the religious ones, I feel like I'm not a Christian, but I feel like a lot of Christian churches, a lot of the more lukewarm Christians have been really infiltrated by this, and they're more social justice churches than they are Christian churches. So it's crazy to see how much this has spread. But I think one of my last questions I had for you written down was, what did all of this do for you, this experience with your workplace? How did that affect you on like a spiritual or mental, emotional level, or even physical level? Because I know it made me feel ill after a while. It literally made me feel ill to have to engage with all of this white supremacy stuff and anti-racism stuff and critical race theory.
Well, it's just, unfortunately, it's become another chapter in how this, like in the past 4 years, like we didn't really get into it, but it's like, in Australia, I used to vote for the Green Party because I was left, and that was like the default left party to vote for. But like, actually, I think it was one of the first times I actually heard the term intersectional. So I was at this, I used to work for this organization called Politics in the Pub, and like every week we'd have a talk with like local politicians or leaders or economists or whatever. And this one particular night, like I would go along and video this stuff and put it up on their YouTube channel. But this one night we had a politician from the Greens Party, and she had identified herself as being intersectional in the politics. And then at the end of the night we had a Q&A, and one of the questions put to her was, so how do you feel about supporting politicians like Bernie Sanders and Jeremy Corbyn, who was a UK Labour leader at the time? And her answer basically was, well, I don't feel that we need to get behind old white men, because that's not the kind of revolution I want to support. And I was like, okay, well, yeah, that's pretty sexist, racist, and ageist. And that was the day I stopped voting for the Greens Party in Australia.
Mm.
And also around that time, that was when I saw a lot of the student activists I knew become very radicalized and,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you know, posting extremely hateful things about white people, and feminist friend posting about how she'd like to eliminate masculinity.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like I saw that post, and then a few friends like, oh, well, that's a great idea. We really need to do that. I'm just like, what the hell? Where's this?
Yeah.
So yeah, that started like 3-4 years ago. And then, you know, I moved to England about 3 years ago, and I originally voted for the UK Labour Party 3 years ago, but I now see that they've gone woke. You know, like
Yeah.
Jeremy Corbyn was giving his pronouns, and there was another Labour Party wanting to know about people's experience of microaggressions. I'm just like, it's happening again, you know.
Yeah.
And then now this job, it's the same thing, you know. It's just this insidious cancer just infecting everything, and it's just, you know, I don't feel like I could have a normal life anymore, you know. Just
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, I feel much better. We've been here for a little over maybe a month and a half, 2 months, I guess, in Pennsylvania, in a different state on the whole other side of the country.
yeah.
But when I lived for 2 years in Oregon, and I didn't feel like I lived in the United States for a whole bunch of times. Like, I felt like I was in some alternate reality with some of the conversations I would have with people. And it was just like, it was almost like the whole state was an evergreen college, or the whole
Wow.
state was moving towards turning into an evergreen college, you know?
Hmm.
I mean, there are places even out in the country where in Eastern Oregon where there are more Trump supporters and stuff like that. But even out there, we would go out in the middle of nowhere and sometimes out to some ranches and things like that. And still we would see like Biden Harris signs and people that were very, very, very liberal, like very liberal. Like, I mean, we would see occasionally like communist flags, you know, BLM, and I don't know about BLM, but Antifa definitely, whenever they show up, there tends to be like a big Soviet sickle and hammer flag, you know, that they have. So it's very strange. And now, like I said, years ago, after being in activism, I had been exposed to it before, but I just feel like the normal people, you know, that had no idea to do with any politics or activism are taking this on now, and they have all of this outrage and all of this like zeal, all of this zeal all of a sudden. And it was like, where did this come from all of a sudden, that you go from being like a really chill, normal kind of person to like you're turned on for social justice the way that like when I grew up in a Christian environment, it was very cult-like. And if there was no lukewarm kind of space available, it was like, why isn't your heart on fire for Jesus? Like you need to be on fire for Jesus all the time. And it's almost like these people that went like lukewarm politics and social justice are like, you know, their hearts and their souls are on fire for social justice and wokeism. And it's like it's consumed them. And I've known certain people that before I could have sat down and talked with them and made some progress. But now it's just almost like certain people, it's just like this glazed over look in their eye. And they won't even give me their own opinions, or I don't know if they don't know if it's their own opinion. It's just a talking point. That it's like, oh, I've heard that before. This is what you say, and this is what you respond. This is how you react to that argument or this saying. And it's like, do you really believe that? I don't know. It sounds like you're just like repeating liberal talking points instead of like your personal experience or whatever. But I'm rambling now, but I don't know if you've seen you've had any luck with turning any of your friends or kind of waking them up to leaving wokeness, or if you have any thoughts about what we can do to counter this.
I got to admit, I haven't had much luck turning people around. Like I say, I've lost a few friends who I've known for 20, 30 years.
Yep.
I mean, there's one friend who we talk, and she did critical theory at uni 20 years ago. So we sort of talk about this stuff, but she's one of the few people that I stayed friends with. But yeah, like most of the people who I knew at uni 3-4 years ago, you know, I don't talk with them, you know, I blocked them or they blocked me. And
right.
I don't know, how do we reach them? I mean, I think we have to try and reach them on a human level, because I think that's what fundamentally this whole ideology does. It doesn't say we're human and we have all these things in common. It's like, oh no, you're trans, or you're female, or you're this, or you're that. It's like, no. We need to bring all that back down to a fundamental level and just speak to each other as human, I guess.
Yes.
What else to suggest?
Yeah, I haven't had much luck either. I've lost some contacts. The only real success story, I guess you could say, is with my fiance. Actually, when we first met, he was very, very liberal. Big fan of like Obama and the Democrats, and it was very liberal, and it was to the point where I was almost like, I don't know if this is gonna work. I don't know. And for anyone that's not watching, you probably know, like, I'm a trans person myself. Like, I was homeless. Like, I did all this activism on the left. So, it took 1.5 years of me explaining myself very carefully, and because he would get triggered by certain things, or upset by certain things, or the way that I talk about Obama or certain things. But eventually, slowly but surely, it was like chipping away. And because we were in a relationship and loved each other, I guess there was no running away from it. Yeah. Like, you can't just block me or run away. And it's like, well, if you love me and we love each other, then we got to work this out. But, I know people that have broken up or got divorces over politics or voting for Trump or this or that. But I've been asking more and more people how we face this, because I don't know. And it seems like just every day, the craziness just gets worse and worse. And the people, I don't know, that I see is like awake. The people that are going to wake up, I feel like, are already woken up. And like the rest are just going to keep on doing their sheep thing, I guess, until they have some sort of maybe dramatic moment in their life where the woke turn against them to eat their own. And they have this kind of cannibalistic experience of being eaten alive by those that they thought were their friends or their family or their tribe. Yeah. But besides that, I really don't know what to tell people other than connect with like-minded people and try and stay connected, because that's getting harder and harder to do these days.
I think like you say, it's one of those things, you can tell people about your experiences and you can go into depth and you can show them evidence, but I think for a lot of people it's going to change when it happens to them, when it personally affects them in some way, when they see the madness for what it is. Right. I just hope in that process a lot of people don't get hurt, or I don't know, too damaged.
It's a painful way of learning.
It's very painful.
I've always thought, like, if you can learn from other people's mistakes, why not? You don't want to make your own mistakes, like, or if you do make your own mistakes, it's good to learn from them, but better to learn from other people beforehand, so you don't have to go through the suffering. And I think while you were saying that, it reminded me, it's almost like trying to deconvert people out of a cult or religion. And I've known Catholic people that were very, very, very deeply religious and Catholic for many years, but it took a lot of the news that's coming out now, or the last few years, several years really, about like the pedophilia and the sex abuse and the scandals, for them to just go like, I can't do this anymore. And it has hurt people close to them and their own families or their own friends. And that's what I think what it took for them to see someone hurt close to home, if not themselves, a family member or a friend, to be like, oh, wow, yeah, this person really got hurt by this thing I thought was really beautiful. And it made them at least think, and like, yeah, I think I need to start stepping away, or at least pause and maybe try and take a bigger picture at, like, or get a bigger view of what's going on. Yeah. So, let's see. I don't know if you had any finishing points. I kind of want to end on a positive note, instead of the world's going crazy, there's nothing you can do.
Just keep talking to people, reach who you can. I mean, I've lost people, they block me online, but then I find other people and, follow other YouTube channels, and keep talking and try to remain positive. I mean, it hasn't gotten too violent yet. I mean, but, look at places like Portland and that's the warning. Evergreen was a warning.
Right. Red flags going up
Red
everywhere.
flags. Yeah.
Right. Right. Yeah. Well, thank you for joining me today because I want to do more of these videos, whether or not they reach a ton of people or not. And I have such a small YouTube channel, but I think it's so important for more and more just regular people like me and you to just talk about these experiences. It's almost like Ms. Carrie Smith made a post the other day. I'll make this my last post about not wearing masks in a lot of different places, especially outside. And in my little nephew's soccer game, he's like 6 years old. There's a bunch of 5, 6, 7-year-olds. They, every weekend they have their soccer games. And it's this huge open grassy field, of course. And everybody's wearing masks and they have signs everywhere. Please wear a mask, please wear a mask. But there's plenty of room on this big, huge open field. You don't need a mask. But I was telling her, thank you for making that post and going without a mask at times when you don't need it, because it only takes 1 or 2 people to be an example to make other people feel like safe enough to join in or to kind of plant the seed. So if they last week when we were at a soccer game, I didn't have my mask on because we're out. It's a beautiful, windy, sunny day in a big grassy field. So I'm not going to be wearing a mask in the park. And everyone else, of course, was. But there were a couple of older people, some older couples that came by once they saw me and my fiance without the masks. One of them pulled theirs under their nose. And then the other one just took theirs off and gave us a smile. And it was kind of like, hey, I see you. So sometimes, it only takes that one person or people like me and you. Maybe I hope that this will inspire other people or give people the idea that it's okay to talk about these things, that you don't have to censor yourself, that while we have the ability, the freedom and opportunity and ability to have these conversations openly and freely, I think we should have them, because I don't think it's going to be too much longer before things like this will be banned.
Yep, maybe.
Yeah. I'm hoping that I'm wrong, but it just seems like with all the platforms these days, they're so I don't know, just for the censorship, and they only want, the one liberal view of things. So keep talking and sharing the info. And thank you again so much for joining me today. And maybe another time, another time we can do another video, and
absolutely,
we'll chat soon.
Okay.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.